Hi everyone, this is Samantha from the Dancing Soap Dish. I hope you're well. Welcome to the Dancing Soap Dish's special collaboration with Claire's Crafty Corner and other YouTubers who are joining Claire this time around. I'm really excited about this and I'm calling it a special collaboration because it's my very first one, so it's very special to me. The Dancing Soap Dish is my YouTube channel dedicated to melt and pour soap crafting. Most people don't know there's actually a couple of different ways you can make soap. There's cold process, which is a lot of the soap artists that you see on YouTube use a cold process. And there's also hot process, which gives you the clear glycerin soap, the glycerin-based soap that I use on this channel. Now, I don't make the soap myself. I actually buy it as what's called a melt and pour soap base. So that's basically somebody else makes the glycerin soap using the hot process method, and they package the soap up into 1 kilo or 2 pound lots or larger for you to buy, just as you would buy, like a potter would buy a slab of clay or a resin crafter would buy their part A and their part B. They sell the melt and pour so that people like me can buy it and craft beautiful things from it. So here is a tub of melt and pour soap. Some of them just come wrapped in plastic, but this one comes in a tub. If you loosen the sides, you can just pop it out and you've got a big block of clear glycerin soap. Then all you have to do is just chop it up, chop it into cubes, because this needs to be melted down in order to work with it. So the best thing to do is just to cut it into cubes of relatively equal size. Then once you've done that, you can measure out what you need into a microwave safe jug. Pop it in the microwave and melt it in 30-second increments. Once it's melted, you're able to add some coloring. So here I'm going to add some carmine pigment and some titanium dioxide pigment, which is the white. And that's going to color my soap quite beautifully. You can also scent it with essential oil or fragrance oil. There are tons of beautiful fragrances available. Once you've done that, all you need to do is just pour it into a mold, and then also some isopropyl alcohol will get rid of any of those bubbles on the surface. You put it aside to set, which doesn't take too long. It doesn't have to cure. So once it's set, once it's hardened, you can pop it out and you can make it that day. You can use it in the shower that night. That's how versatile it is. I get my inspiration from a few different places. Here's me scrolling through Pinterest. I noticed that resin crafts, because resin is a clear medium, it's got a little bit in common with clear glycerin soap. And I noticed that the resin crafters make all of these amazing pieces using really interesting techniques. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to try 8 different resin techniques using melt and pour soap instead of resin. And I'm going to see if I can get the same results as resin crafters do and just sort of nut out what works for both and what doesn't work. So come and join me. So the first technique I'm trying today is the crushed velvet technique, or the crushed velvet effect. Here are some pictures again from Pinterest showing what that technique will give you if you do it with resin. I'm now going to try it with melt and pour soap. 2 layers are required for a crushed velvet effect. So what I'm actually doing here is weighing out the amount of soap base I need for half a bar. I want to make an 80-gram bar of soap, so I've weighed out 40 grams of soap base. I'm just going to pour it straight into the mold, and I'm going to work quickly because I don't want the soap setting while I'm trying to make the crushed velvet texture on the surface of the soap. So I've also got a piece of cling film. I'm going to put the cling film onto the surface of my soap and use the back of this spoon just to wrinkle the cling film up and get a sort of a crushed velvet texture. I'm using a spoon and not my finger because this melted soap base is very hot and I don't want to burn my finger through the cling film. So when I'm happy with that, I will set that aside, wait for it to cool and harden. Once it has, I can remove my cling film. That was quite easy to do. There are a couple, for lack of a better word, crumbs, I suppose, that I'm just removing here that were on the surface of the soap. But here we have the soap surface with this beautiful crushed velvet texture, which is exactly what I wanted. I'm going to use some chameleon powders for the coloring for this soap, because they've got that color shifting ability, which works really well with this technique. I notice it's normally what the resin artists use when they're making crushed velvet pieces. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I would if it were resin. I am going to dry brush the powder onto the surface of the soap. I don't need to make a paint or need to add any liquid or anything. I can just use the powder as it is. The soap surface can be a little bit greasy because of the oils that are used to make soap, and sometimes with one swipe of the brush you put the powder on, and with the next swipe of the brush you wipe it off. But if you just dab it on nicely there, you get some really good coverage. Once I've done that, I'm also just going to turn it over and tap the back of the mold just to get rid of any of the excess powder sitting on the surface there. I don't want that excess powder floating to the surface of the next layer of soap that I do. So now it is time for that next layer of soap. I'm just going to use the same container as I used before to melt soap again. Another 40 grams, which will be the rest of the bar. And this time I'm going to color it. This would also be where you add your fragrance if you want to scent your soap. I'm not scenting this one at this point. So I need the next layer to be black. And so I'm using some black soap coloring. I am limited to how much coloring and fragrance I can add to melt and pour soap. It can be as little as 3%. So you can't just keep dumping black coloring in there to get the deepest, darkest black you want. So in this case, I'm actually going to add some royal purple soap dye to my soap base along with the black, because I find it actually gives me a deeper, darker color. You can see on the end of the spoon there, that color is now darker than it was. And it also is a beautiful reflective purple tint as well, which I find is quite pretty. Because this soap is hot, if I pour it onto the mica, it can disturb the mica and sort of create a hole. So what I'm doing is I'm pouring it first onto a spoon, and I'm using the spoon to direct that hot soap down the side of the soap mold before pouring it over the rest of the surface of the soap. And that should stop me from getting basically a black spot where the mica is disturbed by the hot soap sitting it. This is now set. Doesn't take very long at all, half an hour to an hour. And I am just easing it out of the mold. Let's take a look here. So guys, what do you think? Does this look like crushed velvet, or more importantly, the same sort of crushed velvet effect you would get if this was made from resin? Drop a note in the comments and tell me what you think. Technique number 2 is the raindrop effect. And again, here's some pictures from Pinterest. It's very similar to the crushed velvet effect in that it involves a texture, in this case sort of little round droplets. Again, I'm going to start this project by measuring out half the amount of soap I need to make a full bar. I'm going to use a hexagonal soap mold this time around, just for something different. So I've weighed out another 40 grams of soap base, and I've melted it in the microwave. I've got my isopropyl alcohol on hand, and I'm going to pour that straight into the mold. Spray it with alcohol to get rid of any of the bubbles and wait for it to set. Once it's set hard, then I will weigh a little bit more soap base and use that to just put some little drops on top of the surface of my soap. Raindrops is what I'm going for. I'm using a variety of different shapes. I'm trying to make sure I can get some closer to the edge as well. And when I'm happy with that, I will pour my excess soap just into the next cavity of the mold here. I can actually reuse that later. Okay, so this is fully set now. and I'm going to use chameleon powder again. I've chosen a different color. This is a purple, blue, green. And again, I'm going to dry brush it onto the surface of my soap over my raindrop texture. I'm being careful not to get too much up the sides of the mold cavity, just to keep it nice and clean and neat. And it doesn't take too long at all before that's fully covered. There we go. Again, I'm going to flip it over and just tap the bottom of the mold to get rid of that and any of that extra chameleon powder that's sitting on the surface. To do the second layer, I'm going to reuse this leftover clear soap base that I have here. Just going to add it to the same cup as I used before and top it up to another 40 grams. I've tinted it with the black and the purple, just as I did with the crushed velvet. And when I'm happy with that, I'm going to pour it as the second layer of my soap, using the spoon to make sure that I don't disturb the mica with the hot soap. And once that's done, I'll just give it a spray to get rid of any surface bubbles, and I'll put that aside to set. This is fully set now, and I'll just ease it out of the mold. Let's have a look. Look at that. I think that is a pretty solid raindrop effect there. I'm really liking the different shades, the different colored shades from the color shifting mica. I think that's really pretty. I think this is a very successful example of how a resin technique can be carried across and used with melt and pour soap. For the third technique, I'm going to be doing some experimenting with holographic molds. So these ornament silicone molds here, you can see they have a holographic pattern on them, which is creating sort of like a rainbow colored effect. And these molds like these are really popular with resin artists because you can do some really beautiful things. And I want to know if that holographic effect will carry over onto melt and pour soap like it does to resin. I mean, they're both clear, transparent mediums, but they sort of have a different surface texture. I mean, resin is rock hard and smooth, and melt and pour soap is softer and has a bit of a greasy sort of surface texture. So I want to know if I pour melt and pour soap into a holographic mold, will the holographic effect appear once the soap is set? So I've just mixed up some soap here. I've scented it with lavender essential oil, and I've used the same purple soap pigment that I mixed in with my black previously. These are not going to take very long to set at all because they're so thin. They're ready now, and I'm just going to demold them, and then I'll hold them up and see if we have our holographic effect. And I think from what I can see, we do. You can definitely see the holographic pattern on that one there. This one, it has a really cool pattern. I'm loving that. You can see beautiful rainbow holographic effect. This one here has a nice sort of ice crystal thing going on. Beautiful, especially for Christmas. And this one here, it's just sort of wavy. It's a bit hard to see that one. But anyway, I guess that answers my question. Yes, the holographic effect will show up on the surface of the melt and pour soap. But I want to know if it's going to last. So if I take my finger and I just rub the surface of the soap, just run my finger down the surface there, what I've actually done is I've wiped off the holographic effect. So it is on the soap, but it's just on the surface, and anything that touches the surface, or if I were to use the soap and it was to get wet, that holographic imprint would disappear immediately, basically, which is a shame because I think holographic soap would be really cool. Also, simply handling the soap would probably leave smudges or just put holes in your holographic pattern. Just here, if I just touch it lightly with my fingers, like if I was carrying it around or picking it up, see there how it's smudging the holographic effect on the surface of the soap. So it's really not going to last long. I would say even after just a couple of days of sitting out, melt and pour soap does tend to dry out a bit, and I think the holographic effect, even if you were very careful not to touch it, would just simply fade off the surface of the soap just over a few days. So unfortunately, using holographic molds is not a resin technique that carries over to melt and pour soap. Now the next technique is a very interesting one. It's the Petri dish effect. So again, I'm turning to Pinterest for some examples of what this technique looks like. As you can see, I guess it's supposed to look like things growing in a Petri dish. Alcohol inks are normally used for the Petri dish effect, and you can't use alcohol inks in soap because they're not skin safe. So you really do need whatever you use in soap to be safe to use on the skin. So I'm going to have to make my own alcohol inks. Check out this beautiful collection of mica powders I have here. I actually mixed these myself from a few base colors. Check out my mica mixing video. I'll put a link in the description. I'm just picking out a few colors that I think will go well together. And I'm going to mix them in these tiny little resin mixing bowls here. These are so cute. So I'm going to mix the mica with isopropyl alcohol. So in a way, it will sort of be an alcohol ink. I mean, mica doesn't dissolve in alcohol. It can only be suspended in alcohol. And I will need to give these a good stir because the mica will settle in the alcohol. But I figure this is sort of the closest way I can use safe soap making ingredients to try and get this Petri dish effect. Something looking similar to how it would look if I was using resin. So I've just put in 1/4 teaspoon into each of these little resin dishes, and also just a little, used a little mica spoon, 1 single scoop of mica, and mix them all up with these bamboo skewers. Now I am weighing out all the soap I'm going to need for a full bar of soap here. So all clear. I'm adding my scent. I've just put some spearmint essential oil in here for a lovely spearmint smelling soap. I'm going to give that a good mix. And then I'm just going to make sure, I'm going to let that cool for a bit and make sure that all these micas are stirred up, because as you can see, they're starting to settle in the alcohol, and I really need them sort of suspended as much as I can get them for this to work. Otherwise you just end up tipping out all the alcohol and leaving all the mica behind. So I'm going to put all of that melted soap base into my soap mold, and then immediately I'm going to stir and pour in the mica alcohol ink that I have made. I don't know what to call these things, so I'm just making up words as I go along. And a little bit of the gold in the middle. I noticed sometimes as well, I watched some videos about people doing the Petri dish effect, and they added a little bit of white as well, just to sort of bring the colors out. So I'm going to give that a go. I've just melted myself a little bit more soap base, and I'm going to tint it white with my titanium dioxide pigment. That was possibly a little bit too much, but that's all right. I'll just mix that in. It's definitely very white. Once I've got that thoroughly mixed, I'm just going to pour the tiniest amount. I don't want the white to be too overpowering, so I'm really just going to do a teeny tiny bit. I find that the titanium dioxide makes the soap a little bit more dense, so that white soap's going to be more dense than the clear soap, and the white tends to just sink to the bottom. So I don't want to add too much and sort of just overwhelm the colored mica that I've got here. So I'm just pouring the remaining mica alcohol mixture into the soap. I gotta say, this took longer to set because I added so much alcohol to the soap base. It made the soap base take a lot longer to set. But as you can see here, you can see the mica on the surface, but it's not coming off on my finger. So it is actually suspended in the soap base there. I'm going to just ease this out of the mold. I honestly don't know what to expect. I'm not sure this is going to work. I have no idea. I haven't actually tried this before. So I'm going to do the reveal. I notice people do this. They hold it upside down and then they turn it over to do the reveal. Ta-da! That is interesting. That is really interesting. You can see, oh, I've just got a little bit of gold mica stuck to that there that I'm scraping off. You can see there is a little bit of a Petri dish effect. I've certainly got some sort of white blotches. I was right about the white sinking to the bottom, which it has done, but it's sort of suspended in there as well. The gold that I put in right at the end is suspended quite well. From the side, you can see little wispy bits. The back is a hot mess. Not sure about my color selection. I thought these colors would come out really nicely, but I don't think it's not really what I was aiming for. These little bits on the back around the edge, I'm getting little bits of soap crumb mica all over myself, but that's okay. I can just clean that up with a knife. But what do you guys think? Do you think that is a successful Petri dish effect? Yeah, I think that could be a tick. So anyway, let me know in the comments. Next up is a personal favorite of mine, and that is using resin tape. So resin tape is used as a backing when filling hollow pendants and stuff like that. And for mountain pour soap, it can be used the same way. This standard resin tape here is possibly a bit too small, so I like to use this big boy. This is my 10 centimeter or approximately 4-inch wide polyethylene tape, and instead of pendants I'm using cookie cutters. So here we have a cookie cutter and an accompanying stamp, and I'm going to show you how you can very quickly and very easily use some resin tape to make a really cute heart-shaped soap. So it's a very similar technique to making a resin pendant, except I'm using this cookie cutter, which I'm going to place on the resin tape. So the resin tape becomes a base for what is now essentially going to be my soap mold. I'm just going to make sure that that's pressed down there so none of the soap can leak out through the bottom. I'm also just going to take one of these flower bars that I made earlier, and I can actually melt this back down and reuse it. That's another great thing about melt and pour soap. It's already colored and it's already scented, but I'm going to give it a different shape by melting it in the microwave again and using it for my next soap. So I'm going to give that a stir just to make sure it's fully melted. And then it's as simple as just pouring it into the cookie cutter. I'm going to pour a little bit first and give it a spray with alcohol to make sure there's no bubbles stuck to the surface of the tape. Also helps to make sure there's no leaks at that stage too. And then I'm going to pour all of the soap to the very top of the cookie cutter. Give it a little spray with the alcohol just to get rid of those bubbles. Once that's set, I can peel back the tape, and I have this beautiful flat, really nice surface here of my heart-shaped soap, which I can then stamp with the cookie stamp. So melt and pour soap, like I said, is actually quite hard, a lot harder than cold processed soap. And I'm going to need a hammer if I want to emboss it with this stamp. So I've just given it a go over with my little hammer, and there we have the imprint of my cookie stamp. Then to remove the soap from the cookie cutter, I like to replace the stamp just so I don't get any thumbprints on the soap, and push the soap all the way through the cookie cutter, remove the stamp again, and voila! There is a cute little heart-shaped soap. That only took us 5 minutes. That was super easy, and it's super cute, and it's a really great technique. Moving on, I want to talk about something that I see resin artists doing all the time, and that is brushing the mold with mica. You know, some resin molds have these amazing details, and I see people sitting there, you know, for hours just going through painting them beautiful colors. Then they pour the resin in. Once it's set, they pull back the mold, and the beautiful mica colors are one with the resin, and they have a beautifully decorated piece of art. So I want to know, is it the same with melt and pour soap? So I'm using this flower mold again. I've painted it up beautifully with some of my micas. I've just tapped out the excess there onto that paper towel. I'm going to reuse this purple soap that I used for my failed holographic mold technique experiment. And so I've remelted that. I'm not sure this is the best color for what I want to do here. So I'm actually going to add some white pigment to it and just lighten the color a bit. This is already scented with lavender essential oil. Yes, I can add more pigment to it and change the color even though I've remelted it. That's not a problem. So that's what I've done. Again, I'm using my spoon just to make sure that I don't disturb any of the mica with the hot soap. And when that's set, I'm going to demold it and take a look. So here they are here. They're very pretty. I really like the effect of the shiny mica. There's some beautiful colors there. Looking pretty lovely. I'm going to check out the mold. Did all the mica come out of the mold? It's a bit hard to see because this is such a dark colored mold, but there is mica still stuck to the mold. It hasn't come out nice and clean like I see resin pieces do. Now let's take a look at the actual bar. If I rub it with my thumb, is the mica coming off onto my thumb? The answer is yes, it is. So there's actually mica coming off onto my finger just from rubbing the surface of the soap. If I were to wet this soap or to go and use it, all of that mica would wash off within the first 2 to 3 uses of that soap. So not a terribly successful technique. Lots of people do use mica on the surface on their soap, but they know that it's going to rub off. You're not going to get that mica stuck into the soap like it does with the resin, where it won't come off on your fingers. So there's a difference there between resin and melt and pour soap. And now for technique number 7, using a silicone inlay. So for those of you who are still following along with this video, thank you for following along this far. I know it's been pretty full on. To anybody who's just joining for this particular segment, welcome. I have a beautiful silicone inlay here of a bee on the background of some honeycomb. It is the perfect size to fit in the bottom of this round soap mold that I have. So just make sure you position it as well in the center as you can and firmly press it down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour half a soap bar on top of it. So I've got 40 grams of soap base here because it's going to be an 80-gram soap bar. So this is similar to the raindrop effect and the crushed velvet effect. It's going to be done in 2 layers. And it's a little bit different in that when the soap is set, the part that I'm looking down upon now is actually going to be the top. So what I'm going to do is once it's set, pop your half a bar of soap out, and you need to now remove the silicone inlay. So I find the easiest way to do that is to actually get yourself a toothpick or a skewer, or you can use your fingernail like I'm using here. And the first thing to do is just sort of break the seal around the edge of the silicone inlay. Like I said, I'm using a bamboo skewer here to do the same thing. I don't want to just jam the skewer in between the soap and the inlay because the soap is actually soft, and I could mark the soap with the skewer. I know if it was resin, you could just easily put that in there because you're not going to stick a skewer through the resin, but the soap is softer. And so I've very carefully taken that away. I've got a bit of a bubble here at the side, but other than that, she's looking pretty good. I'm really happy with how this turned out. So I don't need my silicone inlay anymore. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this half bar of soap back into the soap mold, but the opposite way. So with the design facing up now. And now I'm going to add some color. So again, I've chosen a chameleon powder. I like this sort of red, green and gold one here, which is a nice bee color, I think. Now you could go to town and paint up your bee in bee colors and use a whole lot of different colored mica powders to really make a beautiful bee design. Just for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to color that in with the one colored mica powder, and I've just tapped out all the excess powder, and now I'm just pushing that half a bar of soap back into the mold with the paintbrush because it popped out a little bit when I tapped on the back. Okay, so there it is there. I think that's looking pretty cool. Now it's time for my second layer of soap. Again, I've done another 40 grams of soap base, which I've tinted with black and deep purple soap coloring. And I am pouring it onto a spoon because it's hot and I don't want to disturb the mica. And then pouring that as a second layer of soap. Once that's set, you just pop it out of the soap mold and let's take a look at it. Whoa, okay, that was fun. There we go. Look at that. It's so shiny, but the detail that comes from that silicone inlay is really amazing. Great detail. You can see the bee, you can clearly see all the cells of the honeycomb behind it. That is a beautiful technique for both resin and melt and pour soap. And last but certainly not least, our final technique is the bloom effect. So here's some pictures from Pinterest that shows you examples of the bloom effect. It's a very complex technique. Wish me luck because I'm going to give it a go with melt and pour soap. Okay, so I've melted enough soap base here for a whole bar of soap. I've also got a little bit extra. I've got some white pigment. I have some soap dyes. So these are dyes, not soap pigments. They react a little bit differently in soap. I've got some essential oils. So I'm just going to scent this melted soap base that I have here. While I'm stirring that in, I'm going to show you this little tool that I'm going to be using today. It's just a little plastic bottle that has this very long, thin spout on it that I'm going to use to sort of pipe a very thin stream of white melt and pour soap in for my bloom effect. I'm now just going to melt this very small amount of soap and tint it white. So this is going to be for my bloom as well. I'm just making sure I've got everything ready to go before I start because I'm worried that my soap will start to set and I'm really not sure if this can work, but I'm going to give it a good go. All right, so I'm pouring in an entire bar of clear soap base. There we go. Spraying that with isopropyl alcohol to get rid of those surface bubbles. And I'm going to add some drops of my soap dye. And I'm hoping this acts similarly to alcohol ink. If you can see there, it's sort of starting to bloom a little bit, which I think's good. That's what I want. Oh, I just sprayed it with some more alcohol because there was bubbles and the soap dye really didn't like that. All right, so now I'm going to fill up this little plastic bottle here. And I am going to very carefully try and pour a thin stream spiral into my soap, because that's how I've seen people make their blooms. they always use sort of a thin stream. Then they get like a skewer or whatnot and just try and create some petals. This is really not looking like I was hoping it was going to look. Yeah, it doesn't look like I was able to really make petal shapes there. I'm going to give this one more go. A little spiral of white soap. See, that doesn't look too bad. But when I try and make my petals, dragging from the outside and then also dragging from the inside, I've got a big clump, a big skin on the top here that's starting to set. Let me just get rid of that. All right, look, I think I'm done. I'm too scared to go any further. I think that's just going to have to be it. My soap's starting to set and I'm really not sure if this is going to work. And I think that's the problem here, is that soap sets way faster than resin. And for a bloom to work, you really do need that time factor that melt and pour soap just does not have, because it sets up much faster. So let's pop this out and have a look. Well, this is interesting. You know what? That is a very pretty bar of soap. Is it what I was aiming for? Not really. You can sort of see some areas where I used my skewer to try and sort of shape some of the petals. But honestly, if you didn't know they were there, you probably wouldn't notice them. It does look a bit like a flower. If anything, I think it looks like a carnation. Who thinks it looks like a carnation? A very pretty white carnation, but definitely not the bloom design that I was aiming for. It is a very pretty bar of soap and I like it. I think it's beautiful. But is it a bloom? No, I don't think it is. And I don't think you can do a bloom with melt and pour soap simply because it sets much faster than resin does. Well, I hope you enjoyed my collaboration with Claire's Crafty Corner today. Dare I say, if you are a resin crafter, maybe consider making some melt and pour soap. You'll probably find that you've already got half of all the equipment that you need. You just need to pick yourself up some soap base. So thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like what I do, and I'll see you all next time. Enjoy!